Welcome guys to the Livingston Mall in Livingston, New Jersey. Let's go inside and check it out.
Hello guys, and like I mentioned there, welcome to Livingston, New Jersey, and welcome to the Livingston Mall. Now, you guys probably heard me shivering there and why I kind of rushed in the door. And keep in mind, when I was here, it was February 15th to be exact, and it was cold that day, cold and very snowy. It's kind of sitting here in May, it's kind of weird to think that it was that long ago and that it was like 20 degrees. But now in May, at least the weather's nicer. But anyway, enough of that. Now, this mall has been in this area for a long time. It officially opened up in 1972, like the whole mall. But it did open up in phases, with the Bambergers coming in 1971. And then when the mall opened in 72, you also added two more anchor stores, which were Sears and the Hain and Company, if I said that right. Now, the reason why this mall was developed and the reason why it did so well in the beginning is because it benefited from the migration of the population in the northern part of New Jersey to suburban and the ex-urban areas, and the exodus of shoppers and stores from downtown Newark. So when this mall was created, it was full of life. It was a really unique looking mall. It has many cool features that, some of them have obviously changed, but I was very impressed. If I hadn't mentioned too, the person who developed this mall was N. Winston Group. So, but as I mentioned, the reason why this area did survive is because people left from downtown Newark, and that was due to some major issues with crime, as this was the late 1960s, and if you remember, that was the era of civil rights movement, and apparently there was a big race riot that really contributed to that. And actually, Bambergers and Hain & Co., which I mentioned were originally from downtown, and they moved over here. Now, there isn't too much history on this mall. The next thing that I was able to find is that in 1986, the Bamberger space was transformed into a Macy's. That's why I mentioned that the Macy's doesn't have the Red Star logo, is because the Red Star logo on the Macy's didn't come out until after their first bankruptcy in the early 90s. And I say first bankruptcy for now because I don't know what the future holds. But yes, Macy's was actually bankrupt, and they got bought out by the Federated Stores, and they created the Red Star. But I'm not getting into that much of the history of that because we're not doing a Macy's video. That was the last video. If you do want to see how that Macy's looks, just go on my most recent video. But like I mentioned, that's why the Macy's doesn't have the Red Star, and it's been here since the 1980s, which if you guys know anything about Macy's, the majority of them that I filmed did not come to 2006. But enough of that. Now, also, around this time, the M. Epstein store was converted into an annex for Macy's as well during this time. Now, in 1989, the Hain store, if I said that right, gave way to the Lord & Taylor store, when its parent company, which owned both banners, decided to retire the Hain brand. If I said that right, and I apologize if I didn't say it right. So, going in the 1990s, this mall having three legendary department stores, because obviously Sears at this time was really like at its peak almost. In the early 1990s, it was number one in sales before it got passed by Walmart, and to have these two high-end department stores at Lord & Taylor and Macy's, you really thought the future was for the mall. But there was some challenges, in the late 90s and early 2000s when the mall really started to struggle with national chains moving out. But overall, in the last 5 years, ever since COVID hit, is really when the major exodus did happen, as many of your big national chains either moved out to other malls or consolidated operations. Because, like I think I mentioned before, in most areas, I've talked to a few store managers of stores like American Eagle, Victoria's Secret, Hollister, etc. And a lot of times, their chains, in this modern era, only have one store per market for the most part. And this mall being as struggling as it was, this was not the store they wanted to keep open, and they ultimately decided to close it. Now, 2020 was the, roughest year for the mall, and I don't know how much worse it can get. As they started off in February, as on February 6, 2020, Sears announced to be closing as part of a plan to eliminate its traditional brick-and-mortar format. As you guys know, Sears is pretty much extinct at this point, and now the last store in New Jersey closed. But That store officially closed in right around April of 2020. And then, of course, in the middle of that, in March, was when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And unfortunately, the mall had to close for a while. And, adding that into an already struggling mall at this point, starting to lose tenants, is really not, was really a death knell to the mall and was not good. Now, to continue on in 2020, so the mall did reopen up in about early June, but then on August 20th, 2020, it was announced that Lord & Taylor would be closing 24 stores nationwide as a result of the pandemic, like I mentioned, but of course later on, they would eventually close all operations and completely go out of business. So this mall lost 2 anchors in the same year it shut down for 2 months. It can't get much worse than that. And honestly, though, with its current owners being Kohan Retail Investments, which I couldn't find when Kohan actually bought the mall, but obviously if you know Kohan's reputation, they're not the best, and they tend to let malls really die and struggle. I haven't really done a lot of work to them, as you guys are looking inside the empty Sears now as we speak. But there was a plan after years of struggle in 2021 for the mall to be and refreshed as the Livingston Township finalized the plans in March of 2021. But so far, as we're now 4 years later, just under 4 years when this video was filmed, nothing has changed besides more stores leaving. The food court is about half to 3/4 empty, and honestly, we'll see what happens. Now, my thoughts on this mall, I really did enjoy my time here. The architecture, especially in Center Court, done by the Lord & Taylor, and the food court were my 2 favorite parts. And obviously, with the old school Macy's added onto it, it only added it. But I hope that this mall's going to be around for much longer. There's too many things that have just pulled out. There isn't many national chains left. Liz is one of the few that's left. And if you guys saw in the video, or we'll see later, another store was currently closing when I was here and obviously closed. And to lose, 2 huge anchors, and arguably it's the 2 worst, because with Eddie owning the Sears, and Eddie doesn't tend to fill buildings, and Hudson's Bay owning Lord & Taylor, which they don't care about the Lord & Taylor buildings, and they're letting all them, at least for the most part, sit in empty. And I expect this one to sit empty for a long time. So I don't know what to think. I hope this mall can somehow turn around and make it. If I do have a couple friends, this is their local mall, and I know they really enjoy it, and I don't want to see it closed for them, but I'm not feeling optimistic. There isn't much here left, and a mall is gonna keep losing money, and plus when you have Kohan as your owner, the odds are not in your favor. But we'll see. Only time will tell. Hopefully I can make another trip out to this mall. Rumor has it Macy's will be pulling out in the next 2 years. If it does, I'll try and make it a priority to get back down there. And obviously, I think if they go, it's the final nail in the coffin for this mall. To have this mall be completely anchorless is not a very good sign. But in any event here, I am going to sign off for now and please give us the video. Oh, I do want to mention one more thing before I get to that too. As I mentioned before, I have 2 friends of mine that live in this mall, and they know mall employees. And thanks to one of the mall employees who do work here, who let us go in the back corridors, and get a quick footage. You guys will see that towards the end of the video. You guys will see me walking back there. It leads to some empty hallways. And I just want to mention that too. And I'm letting you know now, don't think you can just walk back there, as they do have people that are working here that do care. And as I said, we had them permission. It's the only reason why I did it, and I did not get any of them, on video. So just wanted to throw that out there before anybody thought that they can just go back there and ruin it, because you can't. But in any event, like I mentioned here, I'm going to sign off for the rest of the video. But again, if you guys do enjoy, the drill. Make sure to hit like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later. Live from the Livingston Mall in Livingston, New Jersey. Alex Weinsheimer is out, and I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye, guys.
bright with you. Everything feels right. Neon lights make the night so bright with you. Everything feels right. Make the night so bright.